Mara stood alone outside her cabin on the edge of Black Elk Ridge, the scent of warm bread curling into the cold morning air like an offering. The wheat had run low, and her hands were cracked from weeks of grinding it down grain by grain. But she still baked. She always did. Hunger, she had learned, was not only a wound of the stomach, it was a silence of the soul. That's when she saw him, leaning against a birch tree near the edge of the woods, swaying with exhaustion. He wore furs tattered by distance, his cheek bruised, his lips chapped and splitting. A young Lakota brave, maybe no older than her eldest brother had been when the war took him. He didn't speak, just watched her, breathing shallow. And Mara didn't speak either. She walked forward, slow, cautious, but not afraid. She broke the loaf in half, still steaming inside, and held it out with both hands. "You need this more than I do," she said gently. He didn't take it right away. His eyes scanned hers, searching for a trap. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and accepted the bread as if it were holy. He ate in silence, each bite slow, reverent. Tears welled in his eyes but never fell. "What is your name?" she asked softly. "Tayanita," he said. "I walked 3 days. My village was burned." Mara's throat tightened. "Who burned it?" "Soldiers," he said. "In blue. We scattered. I went west." She looked toward her fields, frost-kissed and barren. "There's little here," she said, "but I have more than you. Come inside." He hesitated, then followed. That night, she gave him soup made from dried root and salted meat. She let him sleep near the hearth on her only spare blanket. When she woke, he was gone. Her heart ached, afraid something had happened, or that he'd vanished like a ghost with no past. But on the table, beside the now empty breadboard, was a single black stone carved with the image of a hawk, and next to it, in careful English, were the words, "You fed my body. I will not forget." Mara didn't yet understand what she'd done. But far beyond the ridge, beneath stars and drumfire, an entire tribe had already begun to speak her name. 3 nights later, Mara awoke to a sound that didn't belong to the wind. It was low, steady, ancient, a drum. Not loud, but deep enough to stir something in her bones. She stepped outside into the bitter dark, breath ghosting before her. At the edge of the tree line stood 3 figures cloaked in deerskin, feathers whispering in the breeze. In front of them, on the snow, lay a woven basket filled with food: cornmeal, dried bison meat, wild berries wrapped in cedar. She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Then one of the figures stepped forward. "You fed one of our own," the woman said, her voice calm, proud. "You gave with no ask. You honored the sacred way." Mara clutched her shawl tighter. "I didn't do it for anything in return." "That is why we return," the woman replied. She motioned behind her, and the others stepped aside. A 4th figure emerged from the woods. Tayanita. His face was no longer gaunt, his hair newly braided, his stance straight with pride. He carried something wrapped in buffalo hide. "You saved my life," he said, "and you touched something greater than me. My elders send this." He knelt and opened the bundle. Inside lay a necklace strung with bear claws and turquoise, a small carved flute of bone, and a pouch filled with black stones like the one he'd left behind, each engraved with a different symbol: eagle, river, sun. "What is this?" Mara whispered. "Our treasures," Tayanita said, "given only in moments that shape the old stories. You are in them now." Mara's heart thundered, not with fear, but awe. "I just gave bread," she said. "No," the elder woman corrected. "You gave honor." They didn't ask to stay. They left as quietly as they'd come, vanishing back into the trees like the wind itself. Mara stood long after the last drumbeat faded. She looked down at the basket, at the offering placed with care and memory. She touched the necklace, its weight heavier than gold. She was just a farmer's daughter on a forgotten edge of nowhere. But now, her kindness had reached beyond fences, beyond bloodlines, into legend. And deep in the earth beneath her feet, the drum had not stopped. It simply waited for the next beat. The winter passed gently after that night, as if the wind itself had decided not to bite her anymore. Mara worked her fields with a new kind of energy, hands no less calloused, but now steadied by something deeper than routine. Purpose. The carved stones sat above her hearth like sacred relics, untouched but never ignored. Every morning she touched the hawk first, whispering thanks without quite knowing to whom. Then spring came in a rush, green pushing through thawed soil, and with it came more signs. A bundle of rabbit skins left on her porch. A pair of moccasins woven for a child, though she had none. Dyes made from crushed roots, their colors more vivid than anything in town. She never saw who left them, but she always knew who sent them. The tribe never came back in full, but the forest watched her now, protected her. One morning while gathering wheat by hand, she felt a presence and turned. Tayanita stood by the edge of her field, arms crossed, eyes calm. She hadn't seen him since the winter, but she wasn't surprised. "You walk quieter than snow," she said, smiling, "and you grow taller in silence." He nodded toward her crops. "The land likes you now. It listens." "And you?" she asked. "What brings you here again?" He stepped closer, unwrapping a cloth bundle. Inside was a small bowl carved from antler, etched with river symbols. "We call it a vessel of memory," he said. "When someone changes the path of a warrior, we give this. You saved more than my life that day. I was ready to stop walking." Her voice caught. "I just gave you bread." "You gave me worth," he replied, "when the world called me less than a man." She took the bowl in both hands, cradling it like something fragile. "You didn't need me to be whole, Tayanita." "No," he said softly, "but you reminded me I already was." They stood there, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two people whose stories had crossed in the right storm. Then, with a nod, he turned and vanished once more into the forest. Mara clutched the bowl to her chest, eyes wet, heart steady. The bread she once offered had been made of flour and salt, but it had become something far greater. It had become a promise. The piece of Mara's land was broken only once that spring, when a wagon rolled up the dirt trail, wheels groaning beneath the weight of greed. 3 men climbed down, their boots far too polished for soil like hers. "Name's Cutter," the leader said, slick-haired and smiling too wide. "We heard a single woman's working this land alone. Thought maybe we'd offer a deal." Mara wiped her hands on her apron, standing firm. "Not for sale," Cutter laughed. "Everything's for sale, especially wheat growing this good." The second man stepped forward. "You've been getting strange visitors, folks say. Feathers, paint, you trading with Indians?" "I offer what I have," she said, "and I take only what's given freely." The third man scowled. "That ain't how things work out here, miss." "That's exactly how they work here," she said. "You're just used to places where fear answers first." Cutter's smile faded. "You get protection from them?" he asked. "From the tribes?" "I don't need protection," she replied. "I have respect. That's something you wouldn't understand." They stepped closer, and one reached for her arm. Before his hand touched her, an arrow struck the post beside his head with a thunk that froze the air. From the trees, a half-circle of warriors emerged, silent, unmoving, eyes sharp with warning. At their center stood Tayanita, bow lowered, no words spoken. Cutter paled. "We didn't mean no harm." "Then walk away," Mara said, "before you learn what harm really looks like." The men scrambled back to their wagon, hands shaking, muttering curses they didn't have the courage to say aloud. When they were gone, Mara turned to the tree line. Tyanita stepped forward, bow slung, expression unreadable. "You never asked for protection," he said, "but we will always come." "I never doubted it," she replied, "but I can fight for myself, too." A flicker of pride crossed his face. "That's why we follow you, not the other way around." That night, Mara lit a small fire and left a slice of bread on a stone outside her door. A thank you, a symbol. The forest answered not with words, but with stillness, the kind that only comes when those who watch over you feel no need to show their strength, only their presence. And the bread remained untouched, but never unappreciated. By summer, word of Mara had traveled farther than her wheat ever could. Traders from distant towns came not just to buy, but to listen. Women with children came asking for work, for shelter, for peace. They said her name like it was more than a person, like it was a place. "You the one who fed the starving brave?" an old woman asked, leaning on a cane carved from maple. "I baked bread," Mara said simply. "That's all." "No," the woman replied. "You opened the door, and the door stayed open." With more hands came more harvest. What was once a lone field turned into 3. The fence line stretched wide, but no one claimed more than they needed. Mara gave freely, taught quietly, and led by standing with, never above. One night, as lightning danced on the horizon, a fire broke out in a nearby settlement, a barn struck by the sky. Mara rode out with 3 others and helped form a line to carry water. By dawn, the fire was out, and when the sun rose, she found Tyanita already there, helping rebuild. He looked up from the broken beam in his hands. "You come for everyone now?" "Everyone came for me once," she said. "This is just the echo." He nodded, then gestured towards the horizon. "Soon, you'll see them, all of them. We've sent word to the far camps. The elders want to speak to the one who fed the forgotten." Mara's stomach turned slightly. "Why me? I didn't ask for this." "Because you never had to," he said, "and that's what made the wind carry your name." Weeks later, as the first leaves of autumn turned gold, Mara stood at the edge of her field. On the ridge beyond the wheat, figures appeared. Dozens, maybe more. Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, elders with staffs, children with feathers in their braids, women who had heard stories about the woman who gave without condition. Tyanita stepped forward, dressed in full regalia, beads shining like river stones. "They don't come to worship," he said. "They come to remember." "Remember what?" she asked. He smiled gently. "That one loaf of bread can feed more than hunger. It can awaken the spirit of a nation." Mara looked out over the gathering and felt it. Not pride, not fear, but belonging. A legacy rising, not from blood, but from kindness. The gathering began as the sun kissed the ridge, casting long shadows that stretched like roots across Mara's wheat fields. No banners flew, no horns were sounded, only the low hum of drums rising from the tree line, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mara stood at the center, surrounded by warriors, elders, and children. The wind braided through her hair as Tyanita stepped beside her, face painted in the colors of his lineage, voice calm as still water. "Today is not for speech," he said. "It is for acknowledgement." For truth, an elder woman stepped forward, her spine bent with age but her gaze unyielding. She held a carved bowl filled with earth from 4 corners of the land. "We offer this," she said in Lakota, then slowly in English, "to the woman who did not ask if we were worthy, who gave without question, who fed the brave when the world would have starved him for his skin. The bowl was placed in Mara's hands. Its weight was light, but its meaning pressed deep into her bones. Another elder came forth, laying a necklace of bone and feather across her shoulders. "You did what treaties could not," he said. "You honored the old way." Mara's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but the words caught. "I never meant to. I'm not a leader, I just—" "That," Tyanita interrupted softly, "is why you were chosen by the wind." Then the drums rose, not loud but deep and resonant. Women began to sing, a slow, haunting melody that wove through the trees like a thread of smoke. A child stepped forward and placed a single loaf of bread on a stone in the center of the circle. Not as a sacrifice, not as a gift, as a memory. Mara watched in silence, her heart swelling with something older than joy. She hadn't changed the world. She had simply acted as though it already was different. And now, others walked with her. That night, by the firelight, Tyanita sat beside her. "They'll return next season," he said. "This place has become more than a farm." "Then what is it?" she asked. He looked around at the circle still glowing with song and embers. "It's a story now," he said, "and you are its fire." Mara lowered her head, finally understanding. She had not just fed the hungry. She had awakened the forgotten flame of unity, and it would never be silenced again. The next morning, Mara walked down to the river's edge alone, the carved bowl still cradled in her hands. Mist rose off the water like breath, curling around her legs as she stepped onto the smooth stones. She knelt and dipped her fingers into the current. It was cold, sharp enough to sting, but she didn't flinch. This was where she had drawn water every day for years, back when the world was smaller, quieter, and less expectant. But today, it felt different. Today, the river hummed. A soft rustle behind her told her she wasn't alone. Tyanita stepped forward, holding a staff carved from ash wood, adorned with eagle feathers. "The elders have spoken," he said. "They want to name this place. It deserves a name." "It already has one," she replied. "Black Elk Ridge." "That's a settler name," he said. "Carved from land taken, not shared. This land was reborn under your hands. They want to call it Wungspe Wachang, the sacred teaching." Mara looked up. "I'm not sacred." "But what you taught us is," he replied. "That trust can be planted like wheat. That kindness can grow across boundaries. That bread can break chains." She turned to the river again. "Then we share it. The land, the name, the future. No ownership, just stewardship." Tyanita nodded. "Then it shall be." He knelt beside her, placing the staff into the ground by the riverbank. "The others are already building. Homes, a gathering place, fields. They say the next planting will be for everyone." "Then I'll need help baking," Mara said, smiling faintly. He laughed, the sound warm. "You'll have more hands than you can handle." As they stood, the sun broke through the mist, and in the river's reflection, Mara saw something she hadn't noticed before. A circle of stones someone had quietly laid during the night, each engraved with the symbols she once held in her hearth. Hawk, Sunday, river, fire, community. She reached for Tyanita's hand, not in need, but in kinship. "You think bread really started all this?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think you did. The bread was just the first language we understood. And as the river carried their reflections downstream, it also carried their story. Two people who had fed more than stomachs, and built a legacy with nothing but truth, warmth, and open hands. By early fall, Wungspe Wakang pulsed with life. Smoke rose from every hearth, not in warning, but in welcome. The smell of stews and fresh bread drifted across the valley, mingling with the sharp tang of pine. Children ran barefoot through rows of squash and beans, and the wind carried laughter instead of rumors. Mara's cabin had become the heart of it all. Not grand, not gilded, but open. A place where strangers found stories, and enemies became neighbors over something as simple as a meal. That evening, as the harvest moon swelled over the ridge, a celebration began. Fires were lit in a great ring, and each family brought something: corn cakes, hand-carved flutes, painted hides, even a cradle board for a child not yet born. Tayanita stood at the center, dressed in the ceremonial robe of his ancestors. He raised a hand, and the circle quieted. "This began with hunger," he said, "but it became something sacred. We didn't just survive, we remembered how to live together." He turned to Mara, who stood uncertainly at the edge, flour still on her dress. "And none of it would have begun without the woman who gave what little she had, not to claim, not to save, but to share." He reached out and led her to the fire. "It is time," he said, "that we honor not just your gift, but your name." An elder stepped forward with a shawl woven in red and gold, feathers braided at the hem. She wrapped it around Mara's shoulders and whispered, "Wiyaka Wangbli, woman who sees the hawk." Mara's eyes filled. "What does it mean?" "You saw clearly when others turned blind," the elder said, "and you fed the flight of a nation." A low chant began, rising like wind through trees, and Mara stood in the center of it, not as a guest, not even as a host, but as kin. That night, she sat by the fire beside Tayanita, sharing roasted corn and stories neither of them had told before. "You never asked for any of this," he said. She looked at the flame. "Number but it asked for me, and I said yes." He took her hand, and neither let go. The bread had started the story, but the fire would carry it forward for generations yet unborn. The first snow came early, brushing the rooftops of Wangspy Wakang with white lace as if to crown the village for what it had become. Mara walked through the quiet morning, her boots leaving soft prints between cabins where smoke rose gently and peace wrapped itself around every door. She paused at the gathering lodge, where inside elders shared stories to the children huddled around fire pits. One of them held a carved hawk stone, tracing its wings with careful fingers. "She gave bread," the boy said, "and they gave her the world." Mara stepped back, her chest tight, humbled again by how far a single act had traveled. Behind her, Tayanita approached, cloak dusted in snow. "There is talk among the council," he said, "that we choose leaders, not by force, but by trust." "I'm no leader," Mara whispered. "I still burn bread when I'm distracted." He smiled. "That's why they trust you. You are not above us. You are of us." She looked toward the horizon, where trees bowed beneath snow and the river ran dark and fast. "Would we lead together?" "We already do," he said. "This is just calling it what it is." Later that evening, as dusk poured over the village in shades of violet and silver, the people gathered once more. This time no ceremony, just voices, calm and clear, one by one offering her name with their own. A chorus not of noise, but of decision. A family choosing its heart. When it was done, Mara stood beside Tayanita, her hand in his, as the shawl was wrapped around them both. Two stories woven into one. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Build," he said. "Not just homes, legacies, teach them to share without price, to give without loss, to speak with their hands and listen with their hearts." She leaned into him. "And if storms come again?" He looked up at the sky, then down at her. "Then we remember what bread did when the world went cold." That night, with snow gently falling, the fire at the village's center burned brighter than ever. Around it, songs rose not in sorrow, but in promise. And Mara knew, as she watched the flames dance against the night, that they had not just made peace. They had rewritten history, one act of kindness at a time. Years later, children would ask where it all began, this village of voices, this home without fences, this land where laughter lived louder than sorrow. And the elders would tell them again and again of the woman who baked bread for a starving brave and never asked for anything in return. Mara's hair had silvered by then, but her hands still moved with strength, pressing dough, weaving shawls, planting seeds into soil that remembered her first steps. Tayanita remained by her side, a little slower now, his stories longer, his silences more meaningful. They were not rulers, nor did they wear titles. They were roots, the steady foundation beneath a tree whose branches reached far beyond what either of them could have imagined. The village had grown. New cabins, new songs, children with names in both tongues, running through fields where wheat danced in the wind like it had always belonged there. Mara taught them all to bake, not because bread mattered more than anything else, but because it reminded them what one offering could become when carried by compassion. "Why bread?" a little girl once asked. "Why not gold or meat or fire?" Mara smiled, brushing flour from her hands. "Because bread is what you give when you want someone to live." One evening, as the sun bled gold over Wungspe Wahang, the people gathered around a fire built from cedar and oak. It was the anniversary of that first offering. A young brave played the bone flute Tayanita once gifted, and the wind carried the melody far beyond the hills. Mara and Tayanita sat hand in hand, watching the flames. "Do you think they'll remember?" she asked. He turned to her, eyes warm. "They already do. Not because you gave, but because you gave first." The fire crackled, and a child placed a fresh loaf on the same stone Mara had once used, many winters ago. No ceremony, just the act, a ritual older than words. And Mara knew, as the stars blinked awake above them, that her legacy wasn't the bread itself. It was the hunger she'd answered with compassion, the stranger she welcomed without question, the world she changed by simply saying, yes. And so her story became not a monument, but a path, one forever open to anyone who believed that kindness, like bread, was best when broken and shared.